The Wyoming sun hung mercilessly over Cedar Ridge in the summer of 1885, casting long shadows across the dusty Main Street. Thomas Mitchell wiped the sweat from his weathered brow as he guided his horse along the fence line of his ranch, checking for breaks in the wire that kept his cattle from wandering into the vast wilderness beyond. Tom had built his life on this land through 20 years of backbreaking work, transforming raw frontier into a thriving cattle operation. At 45, his hands bore the calluses of countless hours mending fences, herding cattle, and fighting. The elements that defined life on the Wyoming frontier. The townspeople of Cedar Ridge respected him as a fair man, though they knew little about his inner thoughts. Tom preferred it that way. As he rounded a cluster of cottonwood trees near Willow Creek, something caught his eye. A figure lay motionless beside the water, partially hidden by tall grass. Tom's hand instinctively moved to the rifle strapped to his saddle. In these parts, you never knew what danger might lurk in the shadows. Dismounting carefully, Tom approached with measured steps. What he found made him pause. A young man, no more than 20, lay bleeding from a deep wound in his side. His long black hair was braided with feathers and beads, and his clothing bore the distinctive patterns of Apache design. His face, though pale from blood loss, held the proud features of his people. "Jesus," Tom whispered, kneeling beside the wounded stranger. The young man's breathing was shallow, his pulse weak but steady. Tom knew the history between his people and the Apache. Raids, conflicts, and mistrust had defined their relationship for decades. Many in Cedar Ridge would have left this man to die, perhaps even hastened his end. But as Tom looked into the young man's face, he saw not an enemy, but someone's son, someone's brother. "Easy there, son," Tom said softly, though he wasn't sure if the Apache could understand English. "I'm going to help you." The wounded man's eyes fluttered open, dark and filled with pain. He tried to speak, but only managed a whisper in his native tongue. Tom didn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone fear mixed with resignation. Tom carefully lifted the young man onto his horse, supporting him with one arm while guiding the reins with the other. The ride back to his ranch house seemed to take forever, with Tom constantly checking to ensure his passenger remained conscious. "What's your name?" Tom asked as they approached his modest wooden home. The Apache's lips moved, and Tom leaned closer to hear. "Ayanna," the young man whispered, the word barely audible. Tom's house was simple but comfortable, built to withstand the harsh Wyoming winters. He had constructed it with his own hands, room by room, as his cattle business grew. Carefully, Tom carried Ayanna inside and laid him on his own bed, the only comfortable place in the house. The wound was deep, but had missed vital organs. Tom cleaned it with whiskey, causing Ayanna to gasp and grip the bedsheets. "I know it hurts," he said, his voice gentle, "but this will help prevent infection." As he worked, Tom found himself talking to Ayanna, even though he wasn't sure how much English the young man understood. "You're safe here," he said, bandaging the wound with strips torn from his clean shirts. "I won't let anyone hurt you." Ayanna's eyes focused on Tom's face with surprising clarity. In broken English he managed to say, "Why, you help." "Me?" Tom paused in his work, considering the question. Why was he helping? It would have been easier, safer, to leave the young Apache where he found him. "Because it's the right thing to do," Tom answered simply. "You're hurt, and I can help. That's reason enough." Over the next 2 days, Tom tended to his unexpected patient. He learned that Ayanna had come to the area trying to understand white man's ways, hoping to build bridges between their peoples. The young Apache spoke of his father, Chief Nalnish, and his grandmother's teachings about all people being connected like threads in a great weaving. "She say someday, Apache and white man live in peace," Ayanna told Tom during one of their conversations. "She say, understanding come through, individual hearts first." But despite Tom's care, Ayanna's condition deteriorated. On the third evening, as shadows lengthened across the prairie, Tom realized the young man was dying. He pulled his chair close to the bed and took Ayana's hand. "I'm scared," Ayana admitted, his voice like a whisper of wind through grass. "You don't need to be," Tom said, squeezing the young man's hand. "You're not alone." Ayana's eyes filled with gratitude. In his native Apache, he began to speak words that flowed like a prayer. Though Tom couldn't understand the language, he recognized the cadence of someone sharing something sacred. Prayer. "For my ancestors," Ayana managed in English, asking them, "Guide me home, and blessing for you, for your kindness." "Tom," Ayana whispered, his eyes searching the rancher's face. "Promise me, when Apache come looking, you tell them truth about their son. Tell them he died believing in possibility of peace." "I promise," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. As the last light faded from the western sky, Ayana spoke once more, so quietly that Tom had to lean close to hear. "Thank you for seeing me as brother." Those were his final words. Tom sat, holding the young Apache's hand as his breathing gradually slowed, then stopped altogether. In the lamplight of that simple ranch house, far from the political tensions and cultural conflicts that divided their peoples, two men had found a moment of pure human connection. Tom remained at Ayana's side long into the night, still holding his hand, mourning not just the loss of a life, but the loss of what might have been, a bridge between worlds that had died with this brave young man. 2 days after Ayana's death, Tom was splitting firewood behind his house when he saw them, a line of riders approaching from the east, their figures wavering in the heat shimmer rising from the prairie. Even at a distance, he could tell they were Apache warriors by their posture and the way they sat their horses with natural grace. Tom set down his axe and wiped his hands on his pants. He had been expecting this moment, though it still made his heart race. He had wrapped Ayana's body in his finest blanket and kept it in the cool root cellar, treating it with the respect he would show any deceased person. The lead rider was an older Apache man with silver threading through his long black hair. His face bore the weathered dignity of someone who had seen many battles and many losses. Tom recognized the bearing of a chief even before the man spoke. "I am Naulish," the Apache leader said in accented but clear English, bringing his horse to a stop 20 feet from Tom. "I search for my son, Ayana." "You have seen him?" The directness of the question demanded an honest answer. Tom looked into Naulnish's eyes that held the same noble quality he had seen in Ayana's face. "Yes," Tom replied simply. "Please get down from your horses. We need to talk." Naulnish dismounted, followed by 4 other warriors. Tom could see the tension in their movements, the wariness of men entering potentially hostile territory. But there was also desperation there, the fear of parents who had lost track of their child. "Your son came to me injured," Tom began, choosing his words carefully. "I found him by Willow Creek, shot by outlaws. I brought him here and cared for him. Where is he now?" Naulnish asked, though something in Tom's expression seemed to already provide the answer. "I'm sorry," Tom said, his voice heavy with genuine grief. "I did everything I could, but his wound was too severe. He died 2 nights ago." The silence that followed was profound. Tom watched as Naulnish's weathered face processed the news, saw the moment when a father's hope died. The other warriors remained motionless, but Tom could feel their grief and anger rolling off them like heat from a forge. "You killed my son?" one of the younger warriors asked, his hand moving toward the tomahawk at his belt. "No," Tom said firmly, meeting the warrior's angry gaze without flinching. "I held his hand as he died. I stayed with him so he wouldn't be alone." For the next hour, Tom shared everything: how he had found Ayana, how he had cared for him, the conversations they had shared. He spoke of Ayana's courage, his dream of peace between their peoples, and his final words about believing in the possibility of understanding. "He spoke of you often," Tom told Naulnish. He was proud to be your son. His last thoughts were of his family and his people. When Tom finished, Nalnish stood in silence for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. Finally, he spoke. You could have left him to die. Many of your people would have. Many of your people would have killed me on sight, Tom replied. But your son didn't. He saw past the differences to something deeper. Tom led them to the root cellar, where he had kept Ayana's body cool and preserved. With great care, he unwrapped the blanket, revealing the young Apache's peaceful face. Tom had crossed Ayana's hands over his chest and had woven some wildflowers from the prairie into his hair, a gesture of respect he hoped would be understood. Nalnish knelt beside his son's body, placing a weathered hand on Ayana's forehead. He spoke in Apache, words that sounded like both mourning and blessing. The other warriors joined him, their voices creating a harmony that seemed to echo across the vast landscape. When the ceremony was complete, Nalnish stood and faced Tom. You have shown great honor to my son and to my people. This will not be forgotten. He was a good man, Tom said simply. He deserved better than to die alone. But he did not die alone, Nalnish replied. He died with a friend beside him. That is not the worst death for a warrior. As they prepared to take Ayana's body back to their people, Nalnish turned to Tom once more. My son spoke truly when he said understanding comes through individual. Hearts first, you have honored us, Tom Mitchell. Now I would honor you. There's no need, Tom began, but Nalnish held up his hand. Tomorrow we hold ceremony for my son. Traditional Apache ceremony, but also something more ceremony for peace he dreamed of. You will come, bring your town leaders. It is time for Cedar Ridge to see that Apache and white man can stand together in respect. Tom felt the weight of the invitation. The townspeople, they might not understand. There's been a lot of fear, a lot of mistrust. Fear ends when understanding begins, Nalnish said, echoing his son's words. My son died believing this. We will honor his belief. Tomorrow at noon, at the old trading post outside your town. Come and see what is possible when hearts are open. As the Apache riders departed with Ayana's body, Tom stood watching until they disappeared into the evening shadows. The invitation felt like both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. Tomorrow would bring either a new beginning or a dangerous confrontation. Either way, he knew there was no turning back from the promise he had made to a dying young man who had believed in the possibility of peace. That night, Tom sat on his porch, touching the spot where Ayana had breathed his last. The young Apaches. Words echoed in his mind. Understanding comes through individual hearts first. Tomorrow, Tom would find out if his own heart could convince an entire town to take a leap of faith into an uncertain but potentially transformative future. The next morning, Tom rode into Cedar Ridge with a heavy heart and an even heavier responsibility. Main Street bustled with its usual activity merchants opening their shops, children running between the buildings, and the morning stagecoach preparing for its departure to Cheyenne. To all appearances, it was just another day in the life of a frontier town. Tom tied his horse outside Murphy's General Store and stepped onto the wooden sidewalk. He needed to speak with Mayor Harrison and Sheriff Wheeler, but he dreaded the conversation that awaited him. The townspeople of Cedar Ridge had lived through Apache raids in the past, and trust did not come easily. Tom, called out Jake Murphy, emerging from his store with a friendly wave. Haven't seen you in town for nearly a week. Everything all right out at your place? Need to speak with the mayor and sheriff, Tom replied, his tone serious enough to wipe the smile from Jake's face. Word traveled fast in a small town, and within minutes, Tom found himself in the mayor's office above the barber shop, facing a room full of concerned citizens. Mayor Harrison, a portly man in his 50s, sat behind his desk while Sheriff Wheeler, younger and more suspicious by nature, leaned against the wall. Dr. Matthews, the town's only physician, had also been summoned, along with Reverend Porter and several prominent businessmen. All right, Tom, Mayor Harrison said, adjusting his spectacles. Jake says you have something important to discuss. What's this about? Tom took a deep breath. There was no easy way to say what needed to be said. 3 days ago, a young Apache died at my ranch. I cared for him during his final hours, and yesterday his father came to claim the body. The room erupted in alarmed voices. Sheriff Wheeler pushed off from the wall, his hand instinctively moving to his gun belt. You harbored an Apache? Tom, what were you thinking? I was thinking about saving a life, Tom replied firmly. He was shot by outlaws, left to die. I couldn't just walk away. These people are dangerous, Tom, Dr. Matthews interjected. They've killed settlers, burned homesteads. You put the entire town at risk. This one didn't, Tom said, his voice rising slightly. His name was Ayanna, and he came here trying to understand our ways. He wanted peace between our peoples. 4. The next hour, Tom told them everything, how he had found Ayanna, cared for him, and held his hand as he died. He described the young Apache's dreams of peace and his father's invitation to a ceremony. The Apache chief, Nalnish Yean's father, has invited representatives from Cedar Ridge to attend a ceremony today at noon. A ceremony honoring his son, but also celebrating the possibility of peace between our communities. The silence that followed was deafening. Tom could see the range of emotions playing across the faces in the room: fear, anger, confusion, and in some cases, curiosity. Absolutely not, Sheriff Wheeler said flatly. It's obviously a trap. They'll massacre anyone who shows up. If they wanted to massacre us, they could have done it already, Tom pointed out. Nalnish had 4 warriors with him yesterday. They could have killed me easily, but they didn't. They showed respect and dignity. Mayor Harrison rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Tom, I've known you for 15 years. You're not a reckless man. But what you're suggesting, it goes against everything we've been taught about dealing with the Apache. Maybe what we've been taught is wrong, Tom said quietly. Maybe it's time to try something different. Easy words, said Ben Cooper, owner of the town's largest ranch. But I've got a wife and children to think about. We all do. Tom understood their fear. He had felt it himself when he first found Ayanna. But something had changed in him during those final hours with the young Apache. Ayanna told me his grandmother believed that understanding comes through individual hearts first. He died believing that Apache and white men could live in peace. His father wants to honor that belief. Dr. Matthews shook his head. Tom, you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. These people are savages. That young man was no savage, Tom said, his voice hardening. He spoke 3 languages, knew more about the land than any of us, and faced death with more courage and dignity than most men I've known. If that's what you call savage, then maybe we need to reconsider our definitions. Reverend Porter spoke up quietly. Our Lord taught us to love our enemies, to show mercy to those who wrong us. Perhaps Tom has shown us an example of Christian charity. Christian charity is one thing, Sheriff Wheeler replied. Suicide is another. The debate continued, with voices raised and tempers flaring. Some saw it as an opportunity for peace, others as a deadly trap. Tom found himself defending not just his actions, but his fundamental belief that people, regardless of their background, deserve to be judged as individuals rather than as members of a group. Look, Tom said finally, his voice cutting through the arguments. I held that young man's hand as he died. I saw the hope in his eyes, even as life left his body. He believed in something better than this cycle of fear and hatred. His father is offering us a chance to honor that belief. If we don't take it, if we let fear win, then Ayanna died for nothing. The room fell quiet. Tom could see his words had struck home, particularly with Reverend Porter and Dr. Matthews. Finally, Mayor Harrison called for quiet. I'm going to put this to a vote. All in favor of attending this ceremony? Slowly, Tentatively, hands began to rise. Reverend Porter's was first, followed by Dr. Matthews after a long moment of consideration. Mayor Harrison raised his own hand, then Jake Murphy, who had been listening from the doorway. Those opposed? Sheriff Wheeler's hand shot up, along with Ben Cooper's and 2 other businessmen. The motion carries, Mayor Harrison announced. God help us all, but we're going to the ceremony. As the meeting dispersed, Tom felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had convinced them to take the first step, but in just a few hours, they would discover whether Ayanna's dream of peace was possible, or whether it would die with the young Apache who had believed in it so deeply. Clock on the wall showed 11:30. It was time to make history, one way or another. The morning sun climbed higher over the Wyoming landscape as a small group assembled outside the mayor's office. Mayor Harrison looked nervous but determined in his best suit. Reverend Porter carried his Bible, while Dr. Matthews had brought his medical bag of precaution that no one questioned. Jake Murphy had closed his store for the day, posting a sign that read, "Gone to make history." Sheriff Wheeler had reluctantly agreed to attend, though he wore his gun belt and carried a rifle. "Someone needs to be ready if this goes bad," he had muttered to Tom earlier. The group of 7 men rode slowly toward the old trading post, an abandoned building that had once served as a meeting place between settlers and various Indian tribes. As they crested the hill overlooking the site, they stopped in amazement. Below them, nearly 50 Apache had gathered in a large circle around what appeared to be a ceremonial fire. Men, women, and children sat together, their colorful clothing creating a striking pattern against the autumn grass. At the center, Tom could see Nalnish standing beside a raised platform covered in beautiful woven blankets. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Matthews, "there are so many of them." "They brought their families," Tom observed, feeling a surge of hope. "People don't bring their children to an ambush." As the Cedar Ridge delegation approached, the Apache rose to their feet. Tom could see the curiosity and wariness in their faces, emotions that probably mirrored those of his own companions. Nalnish stepped forward, raising his hand in greeting. "You honor my son and my people by coming," Nalnish said, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. "Please, join our circle." The next few minutes were awkward as the 2 groups tried to find their places. Tom found himself sitting between Mayor Harrison and an elderly Apache woman who smiled at him kindly. Across the circle, Apache warriors sat next to Cedar Ridge businessmen, creating a scene that would have been unimaginable just days before. Nalnish moved to the center of the circle, his presence commanding attention from both groups. "We gather today to honor my son, Ayanna, whose name means eternal blossom. But we also gather to honor the man who showed him kindness in his final hours, Tom Mitchell." Tom felt all eyes turn to him, and he shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't what he had expected. "Among my people," Nalnish continued, "we believe that when someone shows great kindness to a dying person, they become part of that person's spirit. Journey. Tom Mitchell did not just care for my son's body, he cared for his soul." An elderly Apache man began to beat a drum with a slow, rhythmic pattern. The sound seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the earth itself. Nalnish spoke in Apache, his words rising and falling with the drum's rhythm. Though the white visitors couldn't understand the language, they could feel the emotion behind it: grief, love, and something deeper that transcended cultural boundaries. When Nalnish finished speaking in Apache, he switched to English. "My son believed that understanding between peoples begins with understanding between individuals. Today, we create that understanding." He gestured to the platform in the center, where Tom now realized Ayanna's belongings had been arranged: his bow, his beaded clothing, a small carved horse that must have been a childhood toy. "In Apache tradition," Nalnish explained, "we celebrate the life of the departed by sharing stories and gifts. But today, we also share something new: hope for the future. One by one, Apache elders stood to tell stories about Ayana. They spoke of his childhood adventures, his skill as a hunter, his dreams of peace. As the stories unfolded, Tom realized that the young man he had known in his final hours had been beloved by his people, a son, a brother, a friend whose loss was deeply felt. Then something unexpected happened. Nalnish invited the Cedar Ridge visitors to share their own stories. Reverend Porter was the first to stand, his voice initially shaky, but growing stronger as he spoke about the lessons of compassion and mercy that Tom's actions had demonstrated. Dr. Matthews followed, admitting that he had initially been skeptical, but was moved by the dignity and grace of the Apache ceremony. Mayor Harrison spoke about his hopes for peaceful coexistence, while Jake Murphy shared his belief that trade and friendship could benefit both communities. As the ceremony continued, barriers began to dissolve. Apache children offered wildflowers to the visitors, while Cedar Ridge men shared tobacco with Apache elders. Tom watched in amazement as Sheriff Wheeler, who had been the most resistant to the gathering, found himself in animated conversation with an Apache warrior about hunting techniques. The climax of the ceremony came when Nalnish called Tom to the center of the circle. From a beautiful leather pouch, he withdrew a necklace made of silver and turquoise. "This belonged to my son," Nalnish said, placing it around Tom's neck. "He would want you to have it as a symbol of the friendship that can exist between our peoples." Tom touched the necklace, feeling its weight and warmth. "I'm honored," he said simply. "Ayana was a remarkable young man. His memory will live on in all of us." As the sun reached its zenith, the ceremony gradually transformed from a solemn remembrance into something resembling a community gathering. Apache women shared food with the visitors, while children from both groups played together near the creek. For a few precious hours, the barriers of fear and mistrust seemed to fade away. Before departing, Nalnish approached Tom privately. "My son's dream lives," he said. "But dreams require tending, like gardens. Will you help tend this dream?" "I will," Tom promised, meaning every word. As the two groups prepared to go their separate ways, there was a sense that something fundamental had changed. The ceremony had lasted only a few hours, but its impact would be felt for years to come. Children who had played together would remember that experience. Men who had shared stories would think of each other as individuals rather than enemies. Tom rode back to Cedar Ridge with his companions, the turquoise necklace resting against his chest. The town that had been torn by fear and uncertainty that morning was returning home with a new sense of possibility. It wouldn't solve all the problems between the settlers and the Apache, but it was a beginning, the kind of beginning that a young man named Ayana had died believing in. As they crested the hill overlooking Cedar Ridge, Mayor Harrison spoke. "For all of them, I never thought I'd see the day when Apache and settlers could sit together in peace. That young man's sacrifice meant something after all." Tom nodded, thinking of Ayana's final words about believing in the possibility of peace. Today, that possibility had become reality, if only for a few precious hours. But sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. One heart, one act of kindness, one ceremony that shows people what's possible when fear gives way to understanding. The ceremony had indeed shut down the entire town of Cedar Ridge, but it had opened something far more valuable, the door to a future where two peoples could coexist with dignity and respect. And somewhere in the vast Wyoming sky, Tom liked to think that a young Apache named Ayana was smiling, knowing that his dream of peace had taken root in the hearts of both Apache and white settlers alike.